Hi, my name is Joe and this is part of our series on bringing data to life. Last time we looked at design principles for making infographics, and now we'll look at tools and techniques for making infographics. So firstly, this is what our process looks like, and we begin with a conversation with the relevant people. So this is just to get a really clear idea on what the key messages are going to be, who the audience are, and what kind of format we're going to be looking at. Then we'll make a few sketches on a piece of paper, and this is to experiment with different layouts so that we can figure out how we can best tell the story as clearly as possible. So we might do multiple drafts, and this really helps with identifying issues early on so that we don't spend too much time on details. The final part of the process is to create a draft with a computer and a template, and this is where we start to work on details like colour, alignment and white space. So you can see that the main features of this process are that we start with getting really clear on who the audience is and what the message is going to be. It's quite an iterative process, so things can change, and sketching out helps us to explore ideas without spending too much time on things. And once we do start on a computer, we've got a pretty good idea of what the final look will be. So now we're going to look into a range of different software options and what we think are their pros and cons, and then we'll talk about how we in NRS use a few of these different options to make our infographics. So we're going to talk about some broad categories of software, and these are just our opinions, so something different might work for you, and you don't necessarily need specialist or expensive software or extensive training. And it might be worth taking a look at some online galleries to just see, is this the kind of thing that you want to make in the end? So we'll start with some more simple ones and then move on to the more sophisticated tools. So firstly, we have online infographic makers, and from colleagues we've heard that these can be quite fast, simple and easy to use. We don't tend to use these for a number of reasons. So they come with design constraints, and those can make it quite tricky to impose a consistent style across different formats. And also some things to bear in mind are that data is usually hosted externally, and you've got an extra point of failure since it's an external website. Another option, which may not be an obvious one, is slide presentation software. So this is things like LibreOffice and Microsoft PowerPoint. And you can change the slides to suit your needs. So if you need A4 or a tweet-sized shape, then you can do that. And the nice thing about this option is that it's fairly simple and easy. Most people are familiar with this software. And images tend to stay where you put them, which isn't the same as with a word processor. So this is a perfectly acceptable piece of software to use for making some good quality infographics. The one thing to bear in mind is that they're not so powerful specifically for infographics, since they're designed for making slides. Next we have spreadsheets. So this has some similar kind of positives to the last slide. So it's familiar software to most people, and also spreadsheets can make it easier to repeat an analysis since you're using software that's specifically designed for data. So a simple setup that you might use is to keep your data in one tab and then have your charts or your infographic in another tab. And that way, if your data needs to be updated in future, that should keep things fairly neat and tidy. So some things to bear in mind with spreadsheets is that the formatting and layout functionality isn't always great, and the default chart options usually benefit from some tweaking. And in another video in this series, we talk about charts and the types of tweaks we make, so you can watch that to see a summary of what we usually do. So those are some of the more simple and basic tools. We've got online infographic makers, slide presentation software and spreadsheets. And if you're quite new to infographics, you might want to play around with these tools first. Next up, we've got a few more specialized tools. So there are specialist data visualization tools, things like Tableau, SAS Visual Analytics and Power BI. And the nice things about these tools is that it can be very easy to quickly experiment with different types of charts, and some of them do allow you to create interactive dashboards as well. Some of these options can be expensive though, and it's not always easy to reproduce results. So now we'll talk about graphics editors. So this is things like Inkscape and Adobe Illustrator, and these can be really powerful options. So for example, most of them allow you to create layers, and this can speed up your work and make it easier to manage more complex layouts. But it does take some time to learn these options. And then we have computer programming languages. So this is basically where you write computer code that takes data and uses that data to plot a chart, either to a computer screen or an image file for you to use later. There are different programming languages such as R, JavaScript and Python, and they come with all sorts of different libraries and packages for making charts. This is a nice technique because it's very powerful, so a lot of these different libraries and packages allow you to specify particular aspects of charts, and also it's a more reproducible approach. So if you know that your data is going to be changing quite a lot, this can save you some time in the long run. So we've covered a bunch of different software options, and now we're going to look at how we use these different tools in NRS. This is what our process looks like in general. So the first step is that we create the charts, and then the second step is we'll bring those charts together with other elements like text and images to create the final layout. So to create charts, we use a mix of spreadsheets and code, and it depends on the situation. So we'll use spreadsheets often for one-off tasks, and code, we'll use that often if we know we're going to have to repeat this in future. We'll export charts to a file, an image file, and we try to do as much formatting as possible at this stage so that we can avoid having to make lots of little tweaks later on. Once we have our chart files, we can start composing those together with our text and our images. And again, we use a mix of tools for this, and it depends on the situation. So we'll use slide presentation software. We'll often use that for simple tasks like making a tweet. And then for more complex tasks, we'll often use graphics editors. So that's things like for an infographic summary. We've got another video in this series on design principles for infographics, so you can watch that to see examples for how this works for us. So you might think, where do we get our images from? Well, there are lots of online image libraries available, and some of them are free, some are paid. So that's what we tend to use. We always try and watch out for bias and stereotypes when we select our images. And you can see an example of how we've used some at the bottom here. So we've downloaded some basic icons and modified them in some graphics editor software to suit our needs. This is an example of the kind of thing that you can do. So we've taken icons from our image library and used them, modified them to create a more diverse group of people. So that's how we use image libraries. Another tool that we use is templates. So these are the ones that we've created at the moment. The one on the left is an A4 template, and that's what we use for our infographic summaries. And then the one on the right is for tweets. So this really helps us to create a consistent look over multiple platforms such as social media and publications. And if you're using software to make an infographic, you can use that same software to make a template. So to recap, we tend to try and start with a nice clear story. We'll figure out what the task is first and then choose the software to suit that task. Image libraries are really useful, and we use templates to help with a more consistent look. So this has been our video on infographic tools and techniques, and this is part of our series on bringing data to life. In the next video, we'll look at maximising the impact of all your hard work with Twitter. You might also be interested in our videos on bringing your data to life using charts, and you can see our work on our website, and feel free to follow us on Twitter. Thanks.